friends. Hope you're doing well. So, today I want to talk, well, not so much talk, but tell some stories. So back in the old Ice Rink days, there were a couple times where I had to call the police. I don't remember all of them because it happened quite often. But so one time that sticks out with probably the least exciting story of having to call the police was I used to open at the ice rink. Well, let's back up. So to catch you up to speed, if you're new here, I worked at an ice rink for about 8 years. It's about a decade ago, and I have a lot of stories. Here's one of them. So a bunch of them, rather. So anyway, so it was my job to open the rink on the weekends, on Saturday and Sundays, and because that's youth hockey would begin really early because there wasn't a lot of rinks in town, but there was a pretty big hockey community. So the first ice would be at 6 a.m., which would mean people would start showing up at 5:30. So I'd show up at 5 to get there to start setting things up. So one time I showed up and I saw a car pull in like behind me, which was weird. Not super weird because people were very eager and sometimes they'd try to get there that early, which I kept the doors locked because I didn't want anyone to get in there more than a half hour early because I just didn't want them to get the idea that they could be in the building because that was a security risk, obviously. And also, I was just really grumpy and I needed that half hour to like to come around to the idea of that I had to work for the next 13 hours. Anyway, so what happened was somebody pulled in behind me. Was weird, and then they pulled out and then went the other way so to get to the rink, you have to drive up this long thing, and it splits two ways. One way goes to the tennis courts, one way goes to the rink. And so the tennis courts obviously aren't open, they're outdoors. And so I go inside and I call, the police non-emergency number because we had that. And they're like, okay, we'll send a squad car out. So about 5 minutes later, some cops show up and they come in, they ask me a couple questions and I tell them. And they're like, okay, well, keep the doors locked until we come back because there's been a lot of robberies in the area. So they came back. Eventually they went and checked it out. They couldn't find anybody, so the guy must have left. And they came back and they're like, well, what probably happened was they were casing the place, or maybe they wanted to rob you. And I was like, wonderful. So for the rest of the time I worked there, not every week, but I would say maybe once a month, I would think fondly about that time I almost got robbed. So, fun. It's fun stories. Saw ghosts, almost got robbed. It's just a great place to work. So another time, so sometimes we didn't have to call the police were already there. So there's two such occasions where we would hire the police, because here in Omaha at least, it probably works very similar in other places. If you're a police officer 24/7. If you're in uniform or out of uniform, you could be on duty or off duty, but you're still a cop. And what that means is, most police departments, that's the word I'm looking for, most police departments will rent their cops out. The cops work freelance security jobs, and if you want them to, they'll show up wearing their police uniform, because that there's a ton of credibility right there. People don't fuck around and find out when the cop is there, right? Like, people are much more chilled just by having the cop there. So it's a lot more effective than security, and it's actually not that expensive. I think we were paying our cops $25 an hour to basically just come hang out, and every now and then they would have to get rough with people. But I can't imagine the number of times, if it was just like a security guy or if it was me going out there, I was not getting paid enough to get punched in the face. Even as the manager, I was only making like $13 an hour. So, these guys, it was, we'd have one was the high school hockey games, because high school hockey was new. When I worked there, it was brand new, and it was really exciting, and the kids would come, and it was very much like the football games. You'd have a lot of kids, very little supervision. And so, like, when I played hockey, let me tell you a story about when I played hockey. So the first year they had high school hockey, the team I was playing for, which was not my school, because I went to Miller North High School, and they had like 6 goalies for 2 teams. And there was another school, West Side, who had no goalies. And I was like, okay, well, I don't have any school spirit. I'll just play wherever. Because they were asking for volunteers. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. I'll go play for West Side. So the first game was West Side versus, oh man, I don't remember. It was whoever West Side's high school rival was at the time. And it was the first West Side hockey game. And this was a big deal. So there was probably 500 kids there, and like no supervision. And what had made the high school hockey different is because it was a new league. For some reason, I don't know why, but they like did not have their shit together. Like they were not ready for a bunch of testosterone-fueled boys to all of a sudden have fans yelling, hit somebody, because those fans are used to seeing the junior team that we have here where they fight. And so that's what they thought they were coming for, was high school boys actually fighting the kids they didn't like. And so this ramped up the violence of the game, just however much of a violent sport hockey can be. The league, those rec leagues aren't really that violent. There's checking, and there's 1 or 2 assholes always. But it's really not too bad. Usually it's still strategic while you check. And if you want to learn more about hockey, I made a whole video about hockey. Go follow all the reasons that people would fight. Anyway, so the game ended. We had more penalty minutes than playing time. I think we had something like 140 penalty minutes. So think of 2 minutes of penalties. 2 minutes is a penalty, and 5 minutes is a major. And for whatever reason, they didn't have a rule about fighting. So we had 140 minutes of penalties, and the game ended in a fight. Which at that point, the rink management just said, "That's it. You guys are like 40 minutes over your time. You're done. The game's over." The rink canceled the game because it was getting so out of hand, and they were worried the kids were going to start a fight, and they sent half the kids out, then the other half, and apparently there were still fights in the parking lot. So after that, they made a lot of rule changes real quick to ban fighting and all that stuff. So anyway, so the cops would be there for the high school games. That's anyway. And they never were as rowdy as that first year when I was playing, which I was playing before I worked at the rink. But when I was the manager then, they could still sometimes, especially like in the playoffs, get a little more rowdy, as some kids would show up a little more often for the playoff games and stuff. But perhaps the most rowdy people were my little brother's girlfriend and my mom. Now, on more than one occasion, I had to go because my little brother, let's back up just a little bit. My little brother was a bit of an anomaly in the sports world, in that he was a multi-sport athlete. He was very good. He was very tall. He's taller than me. He's like 6'9". He's also very good at sports as a multi-sport athlete. He ended up going, he made the NFL. He was on practice teams for a couple seasons, and now he trains MMA fighters in Nashville. It's an interesting kid. Anyway, so he was the best player on the team because he had played travel hockey and then decided he wanted to play football, which that paid off for him. So he went down. Instead of playing competitive hockey in his high school years, he played competitive football, and then he played for the school's club team for hockey. And so because he had been competitive and had been playing hockey for all these years, he was really good. The skill level was way above the average player, and so he was the leading goal scorer. But because he was super tall, and most of the kids were not as tall, and all that information about concussions having, lasting damage had just come out, they made a lot of new rules about contact to the head. So anytime my brother would throw a check, it's a legal move in hockey, you can hit people, and there's a lot of good reasons to hit somebody, aside from just like, oh yeah, hit somebody, almost every time his elbow would be about height level, and so he would get whistled. So he was the leading goal scorer and leader in penalty minutes, and teams would often target him because they saw him both as a ringer and a goon, sometimes at the same time. Like, he's the best player on the team, he makes a difference every time he's on the ice, go take him out. And so you'd have these kids try to run my brother all the time, but he was faster than them, he was bigger than them, so half the time they just bounce off him and then he would go score. But my little brother's girlfriend was very feisty, and she did not take kindly to people hitting her man. And my mom was a very protective mama bear type who didn't seem to realize that her son was the tallest kid out there and could easily just kick the shit out of any of the kids on the other team, because me and my older brother had been beating him up for 15 years. He's toughened up. So she would often yell, and she would often yell not super nice things. My mom's a very lovely human, but she's a mama bear. If you go after her kids, she's coming for you. So on more than one occasion, I would have to go sit with my mom in my work uniform, and I would have to be like, okay, I need you to calm down. We're getting complaints. Why don't we go into the lobby? Because the lobby had glass and you could still see the rink. I was like, okay, chocolate, we'll go sit in the lobby for a little bit. It's too hot out here for you. And I remember one time specifically, like, this was every time Tim would play, this would happen, so I'd have to do it, again and again and again. And so finally, there was one time I was like, I had to go out there with the police officer that we had for security, and I was like, Mom, you can come with me or you can go with him, but you can't stay. And my dad, to his immortal credit, would always volunteer to work the penalty box and the scoreboard, so that way he didn't have to deal with it. And one time, my mom didn't come to the game. I think she was working, because she was a nurse, and she has crazy hours. But my little brother's girlfriend was there, and she was jawing at somebody, and I just ended up picking her up because she was 5'0", and I was just like, okay, Jordan, you go. And she's just like getting flailing, and it was just a ridiculous time. So there was that. Now the other time we had cops where it was for something called Twilight Skate. Now, I don't know if I don't think this is a thing in a lot of places, because as far as we knew, we had invented it. The manager who came up with the idea was like, think about like cosmic bowling and ice skating. So we'll have a DJ, we'll put some lights, it'll be like Skateland on ice, and it was pretty interesting. But then it started to draw a really, really younger crowd where parents would just drop their kids off, like teenagers, like 12 to 15-year-olds would just get dropped off, and I'm talking like hundreds of them, just unsupervised little horny kids, just troublemakers, because like half the time they'd get dropped off with money and then just hang out in the parking lot as soon as their parents would pull away. Sometimes they'd come in wearing like sweatshirts, sweatpants, and as soon as they got in, their parents pulled away, they'd take those clothes off and they were just wearing like trampy stuff. And I'm like, girl, you're like 12, like, put that back on. That's not okay. Which I know that's, shaming and stuff, but it's still like, your parents obviously didn't know that's what they were dropping you off to. This'll be more clear in a little bit. I need to tell. I have a whole video planned for the Twilight Skates and the things that went on there, but there were, children doing very inappropriate things. We found used condoms, and like I'm saying, the average age was like 13, and break up children, like, about to engage in sexual activity, like children, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, having sex with each other, or trying to. Like, we'd find used condoms, like I said. And, like, there was one time, specifically that comes to mind, was a kid. He couldn't have been older than 14. He was piss drunk, just stumbling around. And I was like, are you okay? Like, I'm like, is this kid having like a medical thing? And then I could smell it on him, and I was like, oh buddy, like, let's have you sit down, okay? I'm gonna get you some water. And so I went and got the cop. I was like, we got a drunk child. Like, I don't know where he got drunk, how he got drunk, but he's here and he's drunk. So we walked over, and he was like, the cop was like, yeah, this kid's hammered, like, we gotta call his parents. And so he's like, cop was like, the kid sobered right up when the cop walked over, you know, and he's like, okay, like, give me your cell phone, like, we're gonna call your parents and we're gonna have them come pick you up. So the kid's dad shows up. He's pissed, right? Because his son's been drinking, or that's what we thought. Turns out, no, he's pissed because we called him at the bar because he was drunk and he had driven here, and the cop could smell it on him. And the cop is like, what the fuck? And it's like trying to like, this is not a good way to raise your son. Like, you're setting a very poor example. Look at, you know, what is happening. Like, maybe take some stock in your life. So the guy swings on the cop. And the cop is big. He's like me. He's huge. His name was Doug. And he just puts the guy down, like, because the guy's like equally drunk, like as drunk as this dumb kid. Puts the guy on the ground, just handcuffs instantly. Like, it's over in like 2 seconds, and he's got him in handcuffs. So he's got them both sitting in my office, and he calls the guy's wife, and he's like, to his internal credit, Doug let the wife come take them both. And he was like, your husband could be going to jail tonight for assault on an officer. Like, and like, I don't want that, you don't want that. Like get your house in order. He was a good guy, a little old school, but he was a good guy. So, yeah, and they, you know, we moved the car so that way, like, the guy wasn't gonna drive it, and wife was not happy. So, there you have it. Those are, from what I can remember, three times where I had to call the police, or the police had to intervene in an ice rink, which I know I used to tell the employees I was working with, like, sometimes people took things to ice rink very seriously, you know, because their kids are going to the show, and so everything was super serious. And I'd have to remind these, like, young, like, 15-year-old girls that worked there, like, who were just working the snack bar, and would be like crying because some, like Karen would bitch them out, and I'd be like, look, it's just an ice rink, like, what kind of drama can happen here? Well, as we know now, a lot of drama could happen. So, that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you're well. I hope this video finds you well. Thank you, as always, so much for watching. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, all that stuff. You know what to do. Yeah, appreciate it. And I'll see you on the next one. Have a good night.